is part of the fabric of what my brain became after my years here. And the fact that we've got to touch each other's lives occasionally over the years has always been, to me, a very special thing. But let me start off as if that didn't happen. Hard to forget all that. But, I too want to thank the Alumni Association. I want to thank the Homecoming Committee, the Bruin's 50th group, for putting on just a spectacular experience for all of us. Not a moment here has felt anything but special. The memories we rekindled, extraordinary and sharp. Just such a gift. So thank you to all of you, and thank you to classmates who nominated both Michael and myself. When they told me this award, I said, I'm voting for Michael. And they said, well, you can't because he voted for you. The harmony of that was beautiful. Also, just want to briefly thank my family who came here to be with us today. My wife, and the real reason I'm here, Teresa, is here with me today. My son, Sam, and my daughter-in-law, Samantha. That was nice of her to have the same two of the great bright lights in Teresa and my life, including our daughters Vic and Madeline and Emma, who can't be here. So thank you guys for that travel. Also thank my sister Ann and her husband, my brother-in-law Mark Hessel, for coming from Colorado to be with us today. Mark's kind of a minor celebrity here. He's a class of '76. Kind of will. Charlie, I think you should ask him to sing the fight song. But what makes him a minor celebrity is family owned the igloo the whole time. First thing we did, we got here and went to get a pork sandwich, and there was this guy. This other table kept staring at us, and I was like, I wonder if he knows it's me. Runs across the restaurant, he goes, hi Mark, how are you? Good to see you. And he looks at me, I'm Don Sabatini. Let me just turn to my comments a little bit. Vince was kind enough to talk about my career a little bit, and Mike as well. It wasn't really hard for me when I went to medical school. I met Teresa's father, an extraordinary research scientist, physician, who basically said to me, you can't marry my daughter if you go into surgery. I thought I was going to be a transplant surgeon. I don't know if you remember John Nigerian, he was my mentor and all this stuff. And Vic sent me to NIMH, and I studied with a woman named Judy Rappaport, who was the first person to do developmental neuroimaging of children who were said to have childhood onset schizophrenia. And it changed my life. I wanted to figure out the brain. I fell in love with the brain. To this day, I think it's the most beautiful thing in the world. And I fell into a mud puddle called WashU, which was where the Human Genome Project was being developed, and where magnetic resonance imaging, MRIs, were discovered. And I put together a special residency and fellowship where I trained in both. And my goal from that early on was I wanted to understand how the environment, how Coach Alex yelling at you, get on the line, we're doing static. How is that affecting my brain? Is that going to be good for me or not? And so I studied the interface of the environment, its effect on the genome. One thing I contributed greatly to is that you're born with your genes, they make you beautiful. We're 99.9% the same, remember that. But our environment turns on and turns off genes. And I was interested in the brain. 50% of the human genome is devoted to the brain. And our experiences in life turn on and off genes that impact the structure and the function of your brain. What's that mean? That's your thoughts, your behaviors, your beliefs, your intelligence. You can change your brain. That was like an epiphany to me. So I wanted to study more, and I started developing these labs all around the world to study identical twins, non-identical twins, genotype them, do imaging of them, follow them over time. I really wanted to know one thing. What happens when the environment impacts you? The first 15 years I studied, what happens when bad things happen to kids? what happens to their genomes, what happens to their brains, and what happens to their behavior. You could write the rest of that sentence, right? Bad things happen. Bad outcomes often follow. Not always. We could raise ourselves up from the bootstraps. About 20 years ago, I had an epiphany because all that research was making me sad. Published a couple hundred papers on the impact of trauma on the brain, neglect on the brain, food insecurity on the brain. I said, what if we did good things for people? What if we brought into their lives the things that humans who love their kids always would do for the kids? So I started publishing papers. I took 100 kids with a bad ADHD-like syndrome, took their brain images and genotypes, and then I had them take violin lessons for a full year and repeated it. Their brains caught up in the prefrontal, orbital frontal, cortical regions of the brain of ADHD. They looked indistinguishable from ADHD kids, raising the tantalizing perspective that music training is a treatment for what others are calling psychiatric disorders. I then did that for exercise. 10,000 little kids have them exercise every day. The hippocampus got bigger. Their orbital frontal cortex got bigger. They did better in school. Listen to that. When Coach Yackel made us all learn to run, I started getting better at school. My hippocampus got bigger. Not only did I do better in school, but I was less sad, less depressed, less anxious. Things that everybody here maybe didn't know I had, but I brought that here. So I developed this whole movement called Train Your Brain. Let's pump iron for your brain. Same way we build our bodies from the neck down, 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 20 pounds, your biceps gets bigger, structure, stronger, function. So my labs around the world and my colleagues around the world, we started on this vision quest. Could you pump iron for your brain? Is music a way to pump iron for your brain? Is exercise a way to pump iron for your brain? It turns out it works, right? And I've developed models to treat entire families that way. Well, let me tell you why that matters today, why it matters to us. What were we like when we came here as 14-year-olds? Revisit your 14-year-old mind. Probably not hard for you, Charlie, but for everyone else.
Can't hide the truth. Oh, well.
Seriously, for a second, think about that. But just raise your hand if you fell in love any time from the time you were 14, 18, that you thought you fell in love. Come on, be honest. Come on. Right? The greatest period of passion in our life, the greatest period of anger in our life, the greatest period of joy. That's because your subcortical structures, you've heard about this on every TV show, the amygdala, the lizard's brain, that's fully developed when you're 14. It's fight or flight. Your orbital frontal, prefrontal, ventral medial frontal cortex is not anywhere near being done when you're 14. It's only about halfway done when you're 18. And probably for women, it's done around 22, 23 years of age. And for men, like 68 now? Now, why does that matter? If you put your hand on your head right here, I'd really love you to do this, because if you ever have a grandchild that's bugging you, Nance, put your hand on your head and say, they don't yet have the executive processing sections of their brain. That's what we didn't have when we came here. And I want to tell you, every experience we have in our lives, Carl Jung wrote in 1922, we are all the summation of the experiences and moments and people we've met. That's made us who we are. That was his précis on the self. Everything that happens to you affects your genome, affects the structure and function of your brain, and your subsequent belief, behaviors, and activities. Let me put it in a context so you understand. Every class you took, every activity you engaged in, if you played music, if you debated, if you wore Charlie Kurtz, Isaac Asimov lives t-shirt, that impacts your brain. It's laid in your brain, and people don't really understand that. It forever changed your brain. Did you hear Michael talk about that? It changed who he was. He intuitively knows that. And it waits for us to call upon it. When do I need that? It's maybe too hard. I'm getting too far away from what you guys want to consume, but Did you feel the memories this past 2 days? Where the hell do they live? Right? They live in your brain. Those are pathways that were laid down during those 4 wonderful years we were here. They impacted the structure and function of our brain. They set the stage for the next set of learning. It's sort of there. You might not remember anything that Coach Zebron taught you, but you might remember you went to his class, and you might remember the memories you took from him, right? Now, why is that important? Because at 14, you ever seen a beautiful house being built on a knoll overlooking, and all you see is the foundation, maybe some structural stuff? That's what the brain is like at age 14. And what you do from 14 to 18 is you finish your house. And the decisions you make during that time, that'll tell you what your house will look like, kind of appliances you have, what the finish is. And those are bad decisions. If you don't have structure, if you don't have coaches, if you don't have teachers, those problems can lead to a bad house. And a house that's really difficult to get out from under. Does that make sense to you all?
Yeah.
That's called neuroplasticity. And all those memories you have, that's evidence of neuroplasticity. When you see Vince and you go, is that Ray? That's neuroplasticity. Those are real memories. They're short memories, right? And isn't it beautiful? How in the hell does Bill Smith still look like Bill Smith? Those are real memories. And they're often true. In your brain, you can trust. You know it's true, it's not true. Some memories, like Dave Barrett saying, I used to rule Kevin McClellan in practice. You know that's not a real memory. So what we want to think about is, well, then how did we build our brains, and then how do we impart that to the next generation without saying, you got to do this, you got to do that. You got to understand that house is under construction. I have evidence for you. I came here as a C- student. My sister Ann pulled out a box that she found in my mom's closet after my mom passed away, and there was some records of my life. And I was a C- student when I came to St.Bede. And these scary guys in these like black dresses. They sat down with me and they said, because I took some test, right? You had to take some test. I said, well, you're smarter than that. You're not going to do that badly. And I was chewing gum, and they said, take your gum out. Sound familiar, Coach? Okay. And they, to make it clear, they said, you're going to have to do better than you're doing to survive here. Your fellow students, you guys, they're really smart. They scared me, and they said, to make this really feel true to you, we're going to make you take a full year of Latin with Father Hugh. See those memories pop up? And what just happened, by the way, is your hippocampus tingled your emotional called the amygdala, and your brain went, oh shit. And I learned so much from him. And I thought I was so smart. And I ended that first year with mostly A's and B's. The C- to mostly A's and B's, I'm building my brain, right? I'm running the electrical and maybe putting in some pipes. And when Annie gave me this transcript, I was really, really proud of that. Kind of total overall like a B average after C- my whole grade school year. And I was really chagrined to see that my second favorite teacher, Father Hugh, had given me C-. So my brain was still building, right? It's building. New lessons, new experiences, new life. Sophomore year, I was B+, getting a little bit better. Father Bernard entered our lives. Incredible. Father Eugene entered our lives. Mike and our science together, I kind of knew I was a science guy. I could never be as nerdy as my buddy over there. But Kurtz was an aspiration for me. I'm sure most of you are like me, how do I become more of a nerd? That was what I wanted. And Mike and I had our fun together, and I ended up doing pretty well at St.Bede. I developed kind of an A-, B+ brain, got an academic scholarship to go off to St. John's, and Annie had given me in that packet my application to St. John's. And Father Bernard was my primary referee. Inspiring, you know, you open a letter from someone you love, isn't this going to be great? final two sentences are, I judge him to be of college timber. Good start. What he lacks in intelligence and talent, he'll make up with hard work. Like a nice letter, Father. I'm trying to get a job anywhere with that. So I also have to thank St.Bede for those 4 years of brain building, but it wasn't done. I got to thank the order for sending me to St. John's. I really didn't have any other choice. And like all these moments that change us, that moment where we got a little smarter, that moment where we regulated a little bit more, when I got to St. John's, I had the big moment in my life. And I know most of you have had a big moment, and I hope all of you do. But after my first semester at St. John's, I popped out that 2.54 GPA. 2.5, I'm off the teams, right? So I was hanging in there. And then I had biology lab, and I had my big moment. Teresa walked in. And from that point forward, I was nearly straight A's for the rest of my career. My brain, it had meaning, it had purpose. Then we had 4 kids, and I had purpose, right? And suddenly I had built a brand. I had a house with a roof. And I think we all should thank St.Bede in the same way that Mike thanked St.Bede. This place built that foundation that we could build our lives upon. And I'll be forever grateful. And I'm forever grateful to every one of my classmates for all the good things they did to me and the naughty things they did to me. Because that's what made me me. And I'll be forever grateful. And for one thing, for us almost old people, as the head of our alumni association almost called us, neuroplasticity still works. We have 88 billion neurons, 110 trillion synapses. And today we can change the structure and function of our brain if we work towards well-being. And I'd invite you all to do that. I thank you very much, St.Bede, and I thank you very much for having me here today and giving me this honor. And in honor of Charlie, I'd like to say, go Bruins.